Hello, this is Bud. Wizard has a special problem in making a sign. It's not impossible, it's just a little unique. It takes a little out of the box thinking. And we're going to look at his sign and see if we can help accomplish what he wants. So I'll be back in a minute. Okay, here's Wizard's project. And as you see, as I go across this thing, the measurements down to bottom are in centimeters versus inches. So we want to look at a few things there so that we know what we've got. I'll go here. Let's just do it this way. If I go to Edit and Board Settings, Wizard's length is 40 centimeters. The width is 20 centimeters. That's what keyed me without even seeing the CM, because I know we can only go 14 and a half inches. And the thickness is 1.8 centimeters. So let's see what we're talking about by going to a centimeter chart. 40 centimeters converts to 15.7 inches. 20 centimeters converts to 7.9, and 1.8 centimeters converts to a 0.7. I'll leave that chart so we can come back to it if we want. Okay, so let's come back here and see what we've got then. Okay. What Wizard wants to do is he wants to have this spoke shape, but he wants it to be the highest thing on the board, or one of the highest things on the board. Whoops, the right place here. And right now it's recessed. I cannot convert his pattern easily, so I'm going to do something just a little bit differently. And I'm going to write down these measurements of the size of this thing. It's 25.360 on the length, and it's 5.475 on the width or height, just so I have an idea of what I'm dealing with in that respect. Okay, he's doing an edge route, which is a depth of 0.650, and again that's in centimeters, and that's your 40 by 20. If I use a sled and do this edge route, I'm going to be carving into my rails and hold downs. In order to accomplish that as well. So I have to remember that my rails and hold downs have to be wide enough to allow me to do that, because I'm going to go, I'm going to lose material, the actual width of my cutter, whatever cutter that happens to be. This is a half-inch ball nose, but it could have been anything. If it's one of the fancy OGs, then I'm going to lose even more, so I have to have more disposable portions of my rails and my hold downs. Otherwise I will lose my rail, and I cannot lose my rail. Okay, so I know I'm going to have to change this spoke shape, so I'm just going to get rid of it now. And I'm going to think outside the box, so to speak, in that he wants this to be lower than the spoke shave, the background. So I'm going to make a rectangle. In this case, I'm going to make it 40 by 20, and I'm going to center it. And I'm going to make it a carved region. And it's at 635 right now. Let's try a 0.5 or 500 centimeters. Okay, the workshop stays okay. It's a raised thing. It may not have been raised on its original, but we'll let him worry about that, whether he wants it raised or recessed. So that gives me this whole board now as a recessed area. And we'll talk about that in a minute. What we talk about now, if I'm on, if I do this on a sled and I do this edge route, then this edge route is going to carve into a portion of my rails and my hold downs. Okay, so I have to realize that and make my rails and hold downs wide enough that I can sacrifice parts without losing the whole thing and still maintain a grip on my piece. And we'll deal with that a little more later. Let's work on getting everything in place on this. So now if I go to my patterns in tools, I brought in another spoke shave that is actual raised pattern, and I want it 25.360 by 5.475. I'll be back in just a minute. Okay, so now we're going to go to layout, and we're going to center this thing. And it's at a 0.635. Let's see what it looks like here. Well, phooey. Oh, wrong one, over here. Let's see if I do a depth of a 0.5. I don't know, maybe even a 0.4. Makes it up a little higher, maybe. Let's see what happens here if I make this a 500. Maybe a little bit. Okay, but I can play with my depth and my height here to get this where I want it. I can also come over here and see what happens if I do an additive. An additive took away from these other numbers, so maybe I don't want that. I'm just going to leave it normal, see what we got here again. See if I make it a 900. I can't see any real difference. Maybe it's just my eye, but it won't hurt from that standpoint. Okay. So now I have my lettering down here. I've got my spoke shave, and I've got lettering up above, which is Tommy's, which was an outline type carve. Bitwise, he's using a 90-degree V bit, and it's at a 350. So let's come back here again. This is a 500. Okay, so Tommy's at a 350. He's not going to get me. So let's make this like a 0.6. Let's see what we get. Probably have to go a little deeper. Now that's with the 90. I would probably go with the 60 degree versus that, but let's make it a 0.8. Let's see what we get. Okay. That's about the way he had it before. Just using the 90. Okay, now remember, this background is milled lower than anything else. So we've lost part of his edge route. His edge route depth is a 650. So I would have to make it something like a 1, which is a little over halfway on the board, because the board thickness is a 1.8. And that gets me back to where depth is okay. Now the only other thing is on the edge route, I'm leery of going full bore on some of these bits, putting that much stress on the machine. I can use the maximum pass depth of, say, 1/4 of an inch or 1/2 inch. In fact, I read sometime never go deeper than the diameter of your bit. I would rather do 1/4 of an inch. So it will take 4 passes to get to, well, about 4 passes to get to this depth. Maybe 2, I'm not sure, but that will be less stress on the machine in any respect. Now remember that this edge route is going to go into my rails and my hold downs on the ends by half the width of the cutter. And that's one of the reasons I wanted to do it in steps from that standpoint. But now if I tilt this board, we see that we've got the same kind of edge that he must have been thinking about to start with. And the spoke shave is raised. Now if this was done on a larger board rather than using a sled, then I would make my board larger by about 8 centimeters, and this is just a guess. From that standpoint, and some of these things are going to change where they are. This lettering I'm going to move back down. So I've still got my box at 40 and 20. So I can use it Now, so here's the top of my box. This inner rectangle is my actual sign. Okay, the edge route no longer applies. And there's my board. Okay. So now what I need to do is this rectangle that's doing the milling, I want to bring it out by say a 43. By a 23. So that I'm actually milling outside of where the sign is. Because, whoops. I have a problem. Hold on. Okay, so I made my rectangle a little bit larger than what I need for my actual sign, but I've left enough so that I've got rails on my piece of wood. And of course, I have to add my 7 or 8 inches to the length of this board when I actually put in the real board. Now, we're working with the real board, no sled at this point. Okay, so now I want another rectangle that is 40 by 20. So here's my 40. Come down here and do my 20. And I want to center it. And now I'm going to use my bit. I'm going to use a 1/2 inch ball, just like he was doing. And we had this at a 1. And we had the maximum pass depth of a 0.25. And let's see what I got here. Where is that? This is rectangle here. Okay. And I also want to do a cutout. Since this is not a sled, this is a board. I'm going to increase the number of tabs to 7. I like that. Maximum pass depth, I'm going to put a 0.25. I'm going to flip the cutout so it's outside. And I'm going to accept, and I'll be right back. So now, if I do a high cutout, yeah. Okay, I'll just unhide it so we see what we got here. Flip this thing over. And there we see the back with a cutout. Now again, this is a solid piece of wood versus being on a sled. No sense doing a cutout on the sled if I've got the right size wood. If I look at this again, just make sure, yeah, I've got my edge the way he wants it, but it's not an edge route, it's just done with this extra rectangle and the cutout. So that is basically what we're talking about. I can use a sled with the right size wood and realize that I'm going to sacrifice part of my rails and hold downs, or I can use a larger piece of wood in my design and include the rails in that larger piece of wood, but just enlarge how big I make the actual recess for the background of the sign and allow for the covers that I'm going to do. And Whizzer, I hope that helps. This is a special lesson, thinking basically inside the box or outside the box, however you want to say it, so that things on the sign look raised compared to the background, and there is no raised edge around the edge of the sign. It's actually as low or lower than anything else on the sign. I hope that helps.